Ah, look at this happy guy. He built his own desk. I got this really nice sit-stand desk from Desky, but the desktop they make doesn't fit my corner, so I had to get some cardboard, move it around, pretend I was working, do some measurements, write some notes, and I have a beautiful cardboard desk. But that's not going to last very long, so I bought some wood. This is 5/4 raw walnut, and raw means you're cheap and you got to mill it yourself. I don't have a jointer, but I do have a planer, so I took a piece of MDF, made a planing sled. What you do is you put your wood on the sled, you shim it so it doesn't wobble, and you run it through the planer until one side is totally smooth. Once that's done, you flip it over, slap its ass, and run it through the other way. That gives you 2 parallel sides. I did this with each piece of wood until each one was exactly the same thickness. I laid out all the pieces under that handy template to decide which order they would go in, and then cut out the excess I knew I wouldn't need. And once I was done with the joy of planing, I repurposed that jig into a straight edge jig. I added 4 toggle clamps. What you do is you clamp a board on there and you push the jig against the fence. And that allows you to cut a straight edge on the piece of wood. It's super easy, not stressful at all. I could do this all day. So you see there how much bow I took off that one piece of wood, and once that's done, you lose the jig, you flip the board over, slap it on its ass, and you run it through again. That cuts off the other edge in a parallel way. And that, my friends, is milling. Look at those edges. And to join these boards, I'm doing mortise and tenons, and I don't have a fancy tool for this. So I mark each board where the faces meet, and then I transfer that to the edges where I mark where each mortise will be cut. Then I take my router with a 1/4 inch upcut bit, and I drill a hole at each end of the mark. There's one, there's the other end, and then I route out the center. This also is not stressful at all. It is totally relaxing. Behold the mortise. So I didn't have any tenons, so I had to make it myself, and I took a piece of walnut, these are the fanciest tenons ever, and I milled it down to about 1/4 inch thick until it would fit into my mortise. Then I cut that into strips on the table saw and used the table saw to bevel the edges so they would slide into the slots a little easier. You can see those bevels there. And a test fit. Oh yeah. Chop those up into little bits, and they're each 2 inches deep. For peace of mind, I did a dry run where I just put everything together, made sure it fit, made sure it lined up, and it did. So I busted that apart and prepared for my first ever glue up. This was also very relaxing. As you can see, I put the clamps under the wood, then I put glue in all the mortises, put a bead along the edge, used my silicone brush to smooth it out, dropped in my tenons, added glue on those, lined them up, and clamped away. It was go time. Gotta say, it's pretty satisfying to see these clamps come together, the glue squeeze out, just like in the YouTube videos. I added another set of clamps on top and scraped out the excess glue. After the glue set for a couple hours, I took off the top clamps because I needed them, and I decided to do the second piece. I did this table in 2 separate pieces because this was my first glue up and I was really nervous. So I did one big piece and the smaller piece, and then I would glue them together later. If you're wondering why I have this big offset between these pieces, I just decided that piece of wood was better than the end. So I decided to cut off the excess, get my table in a workable shape, flip that piece around. That's the curvy section, cutting off those excess pieces, cutting off the other excess pieces, lots of excess. That's where the curve goes. And I knew I needed some sort of clamp to really get that curve set when I glued it, so I cut this little notch out. You'll see why. Glued up the small table piece, put the tenons in, glued that up. This was going to be the widest part of the table where I had to clamp. So luckily I had some very long bar clamps, so I put them together, clamped those underneath, and then I used one clamp for that little notch I cut where the curve is right there. And then I doubled up some other clamps. I put them face to face where they were pulling on each other to make the gap. Once that was done, took off the clamps, tested my strength, and started measuring out the real cuts for the table. I did a lot of math and measuring using the square to make things square, and I measured diagonals to make sure it was square and marked everything up. I used a string to do the radius inside the inner curve of the desk where my belly goes, and put a straight edge and chopped away. That first edge was super clean. I checked the square, it was. Cut the next edge and the next, and moved on to the hard part, which was the middle turn. Oh, checked it for square. Yes, it was. Here's the middle bit. So I cut all the way up to right before the curve. And on the other side, the same thing. And then got out my little jigsaw for the manual part of making that curve. So relaxing. Turned out beautiful, and that was the final shape of my table. So I slapped its ass, flipped it over, and worked on the underside. I did a lot of experimenting where you don't see, just in case I messed up. So here I'm smoothing the seams, taking off all the glue, and then I needed to measure for where the actual screws go in the frame, so I wouldn't put any hardware there. These are the marks on my handy cardboard template. Love that thing. And these are metal C-channels to reinforce the table. They are definitely overkill, but I wanted to learn how to do it, so here we go. I traced off the position of each C-channel and then put clamps to guide the router. So I would do one side, flip the router around, do the other side against the other straight edge, and then freehand the ends. This is totally relaxing. Then I would swap out the bit, put a 3/4 inch bit, and then groove out the rest of the slot. There we go. Repeated that process 3 more times, and it's funny, you do this enough and it actually starts to become enjoyable. So these are threaded inserts that you put into the table, and then you screw the bolts to hold down the C-clamps. And I have this little handy marker, one pull and snap, super satisfying. And I got this handy little guide for my drill so it would make vertical holes, nice and straight. And then you just take the little inserts, screw them in. There's a little test fit with that screw. Then you put the C-channel, and then you bolt it down. Ta-da! Quick slap, flip it over. And now it's time to sand the important side. So I took a pencil, put marks all over it, and then just sanded them off. I believe I did 4 passes. I did 80, 120, 150, and 220. Did the face, did the edges. And then I used a little foam block with some sandpaper to get that inner curve. And by the time I was done, it was super smooth. Little slap, flip it over, and then I tested my router on the underside of the 1/8 inch roundover bit. It was perfect, so I flipped it back over and routed the good side. Got the corners, a little buffing. Bzz, bzz. And then it was time to do the epoxy, filling all those little holes. So I took a vacuum, sucked out all the sawdust, and got my epoxy and my powder dye. Mixed the epoxy, put the dye in, mixed it till I thought it looked right, and then I drizzled it onto each hole with a little popsicle stick. This was pretty straightforward, but it would sink into some holes, so I would have to do another pass. But got them all filled up, every little tiny pock. And then I got a 3/4 inch bit, and I had to make a jig because if I just ran the router over these things, it would get all wobbly and bumpy. So I needed something to ride it over the epoxy while the bit could scrape off the top.
All right.
And there you go. So I went over each one and then sanded them down for the final bit. A little slap, flip it over. Then it was time to put the finish on the table. So I taped off the C-clamps, wiped it down with the damp rag, and then did my first coat. Got the edges, all the little drips. And then I took a little sanding block, I think it was like a 180, and just took off the top surface, and that really got me excited because it was super smooth. So I wiped off all the sawdust, did another pass, and when that was done, peeled off the tape, and the bottom side was finito. This is the satisfying part. Slap, slap, flip it over, wipe off any sawdust with a damp rag, and then put my first coat on the good side. Get those edges, and then do the sanding block, wipe off all the dust, and then do another coat. I did this 3, maybe 4 times, and this was the final lustrous coat. Took it back inside, put it back on the stand, drilled some holes, put some screws in, and it was secured to the stand. Finally, I could do the final wiring so it could go up and down, and it worked. Attach the controls to the desktop, and peel out that sweet piece of plastic. And there you have it, my final table, the first thing I've ever built, made out of solid walnut. And every time I said it was easy, it was not. I have a full 5-hour video explaining every mistake I made, everything I did to fix it. There are tears. It's wonderful. Check it out if you got 5 hours.